I really need to get my guitar practice in. As a matter of fact, I better turn this down before it feeds back. Oh, it's not going to feed back. It's already turned down. That's great. Um, but I've been obsessing, in my free time, and I have lots of it right now over some stuff, and I think it's worth talking about. I think it's worth talking about. I don't see a lot of conversation about this. But my theme tonight is, I'm sorry about that internet thing. And the concept behind this is that I've always been a fan of certain things, and magically they kind of take off, you know. No, they all kind of took off. Like as a child, the big thing for me was the Beatles. Now, I did not help the Beatles take off because they had already broken up when I had listened to them. But that was the first thing that I actually ever heard, that I ever became involved in, where I was like, my God, this is good, right? And and a lot of people felt that way about the Beatles. After that, I really liked Chuck Berry. And this band, the Bay City Rollers, came along, and I just heard them for like a few minutes in a car, and I was like, these guys are great. Now, they did sell a ton of records, but they did not take off the way I expected them to. But you can watch hours and hours worth of stuff on my channel to go through that. I don't have to go through that. And then, there was a lull, and then I discovered like punk rock, and I'm like, this is it. Rock and roll is back. And sure enough, everything exploded, the new wave and all this other stuff. And then there was a lull in my life. And then a girlfriend of mine actually introduced me to the concept of the internet. And this is in the early 90s. And my father had just passed away. I was heading nowhere. I couldn't figure life out, and I found this thing, and I decided to research this. Like, how is this working? And I learned about TCP/IP, and I bought like TCP/IP Illustrated for all you old timers out there. You know what I'm talking about, and Unix network programming, and the original C book, right? Very exciting times, and I became a bit of a I tried to popularize this concept of the internet and Unix and C programming and all this other kind of stuff around it. And it was a very exciting time. You have to understand, back then, like if you were chatting, for example, you were chatting on IRC. And to be chatting on IRC, that means somebody had to go out there and set up an IRC server. And they'd be like, we have an IRC server here. You can join here. We're part of EFNet or whatever the heck, you know? And then there would be battles to take over the channels and all this stuff. And you had to protect it, right? And we all knew at that point in time that the internet and the Unix systems and the protocols and all that were kind of inherently, there was some inherent insecurity involved in this. And so it was the wild, wild west times, right? And I think that's what made it kind of exciting for a lot of us that were in there digging in and finding out, how does each, all of the little pieces of software work, and like making minor changes to the C code underneath this, and running operating systems like Linux, where we had access to the entire source code for the operating system and all of the utilities and all this other stuff. And it was all very, very exciting. And I was a big proponent of this. I'm like, this is like exciting. This is really, really fun stuff. And, so why do I say I'm sorry? Well, I was a proponent for a very long time, and essentially what ends up happening is that corporations get more and more and more involved. Now, don't get me wrong. Back then, you had Stanford University Network, Sun Microsystems, big company. They were buying some fancy cars off of those servers they were selling, right? And Cisco comes out of this as well, right? Oracle was before. We hated Oracle. I don't know about you older Unix guys than me. I hated Oracle because their licensing was absolute trash. I went with Sybase, which was a good Unix database. But that's because our DBA recommended it to me. I was like, the hell with this Oracle stuff. What are we going to do? I think there was a thing called Informix back then as well. But, everyone was just kind of doing their best in a bad situation because it exploded and became popular. There wasn't enough bandwidth. The protocols hadn't, we didn't even have things like variable length subnet masks. Weren't supported in a bunch of hardware at the time. It was an absolute nightmare. We had to do everything we could to stretch out every little bit of functionality and bandwidth and everything else to keep this damn thing going. And, companies like Cisco, their stuff was so hard hit that they had to come up with concepts like root dampening because like our CPUs are burning out every time networks go down and come back up, and then they rebroadcast all these routes. We're not going to accept it. We're going to dampen that for a while. So then whole parts of the internet would just like disappear. It was a crazy, crazy time, but I was still a proponent because I was like, we are going to stabilize this. It's all new, and it's all based on computers, which are complicated, right? And so we did that. And the other thing I was a big proponent of was every place I worked at, I made sure we didn't use Windows unless we absolutely had to use it, because the overhead of running an operating system like that didn't make sense. And like I'm talking like NT, right? And I had already had some experiences with early NT that we had at one place that I was working, but it wasn't ours. And I would have customers saying, "Can you reboot it? Because I've like changed the IP address or something, or something's happened. Can you reboot the NT server?" And it was a pain. And that guy went on to FreeBSD afterwards. He's like, "I'm done," and he actually became a FreeBSD committer. He's like, "I am so done with this." But it was all very exciting. It was all very fun, and it was all very positive. And I liked the idea that I could have communications with people around the world and learn things. And I really thought, wow, that spreading information like this can only be good for society, right? But I want to flash forward to where, and, people were getting jobs and good paying jobs. And people were being treated with respect for the amount of effort they put into learning what they had to do, right, and what they brought to the table. Flash forward to today. What is the internet? Well, we have Facebook chewing up a huge part of the internet, and it really appears to be, since we don't pay for it, a data mining scheme. We have completely false information being spread and creating political religious cults around the world, and nobody is doing anything to stop it, and in many ways it's too late now. The concept of truth is gone. It's about hatred, it's about power, whatever. We have companies like Airbnb, which are now renting out entire homes in areas where people cannot find a place to live. We have companies like Uber, which are absolutely huge money-making machines. I don't know if they're profitable, but there's money making, where they often refuse to consider people employees. The list goes on and on and on and on. We have the CrowdStrike thing the other day, which absolutely shouldn't have happened. And I said in a video I made before, an engineer would never allow this kind of crap to happen. We have no respect for the employees anymore. We have no respect for people that have dedicated time to helping companies to succeed. And so my apology is that, yeah, I'm stupid. Because we know what companies are like, and we know what they're going to do. What does a company want to do? Make as much money as possible. And in the many years that I've worked in the, I call it the .com still, right? I think Jello Biafra, I was upset one night because he said the .com assholes or something like that. But I'm like, yeah, I think you're right, Jello, right? But I still call it the .com thing. But in the many decades that I've worked, you have to understand, I worked with some of the best people you could ever meet. I worked with CEOs that would welcome me into their office and have very frank conversations with me about finance, about logic, about statistics, about their knowledge, you know. And the people I really respect the most are the people that are like, and I've worked with architects that are like this. I've worked with CEOs that are like this. They're like, I don't know. Like, gee, I don't know the answer to that question. Can you like try to figure it out, right? Like it's almost always statistics. It's so funny because in studying with computer science and all the stuff I ever did, I didn't pick up very many statistics books, but I should have, because a lot of it is about statistics. It'll be things like, okay, we've decided to spread this out across 100 hosts. What are the odds if one host is having a failure on a hard drive that another host is going to have a failure based on the hard drive failure rate? Yeah, that's the kind of thing that you start to think about, right? Those are the kind of things you have to calculate because you have to protect your company. So one thing is that the companies that are coming up and the sharing of information that is going on is not great. As a matter of fact, all the scholarly information that I see is kind of hidden behind paywalls anyway. So it's kind of like it'd be just as easy to go to your library at your university and say, hey, I need this paper from wherever, and it shows up, right? We already had a system like that. So that's one thing. But the other thing is that it's not interesting anymore because, like I said, we kind of knew that these operating systems, and it doesn't, Unix was good. Windows didn't have a lot of great security early on because they didn't even think that the internet was a big thing. Go track down the very, very first draft of Bill Gates' book. He didn't think that the internet was anything, right? So they were not prepared for it. And then, so many security issues. Plus, it was the number one operating system in the world, right? But we knew, there's a lot of problems with this. Now, we enjoyed it because, there are these wars going on in the internet back then. But what it's come down to today is that we have not solved those problems within the operating systems, right? Instead, we've said, okay, we're going to use containers, essentially. And these are things that, once it's bad, like we don't want this container, because the container has the operating system in it and everything packaged. It's a very nice idea. It's really good. And it's providing so much stability to so many platforms out there, right? But anyway, yeah, orchestrating that is now the thing that happens. And you're orchestrating that within a cloud service using their concept of how you orchestrate it and contain it and all this kind of stuff. So my point is this. The days of the excitement, unless you're doing illegal things as a hacker, I'm sure that's still exciting and it can be profitable, we're seeing these days, I guess. It's not all that exciting. And the concept of using logic and stuff like that, it's already kind of baked into what you're using. It's not up to you anymore to think statistically and logically and sort of stuff like that. And the whole concept of cloud is that you should never have to leave it. Like, I'll give you an example. In AWS, let's go back. My early days, if I had to do something like create a ticket system, I would write it in C, and I would use VI, and I would use C tags. Right? Anyone that's that far back, you'll know what I'm talking about. It was a bit of a pain, but it worked. And then I would compile it and I would run it, and there you go. Right? And I'd be doing that all on like the unit. I'll choose a Unix system or have a system, and I compile it there and then put it on whatever we're doing. It's a lot different today. If the concept in cloud now is, for example, in AWS, you want to use Cloud9, which is a dev environment, which is an EC2 instance that has Linux running. So you have a Linux shell available for you, and you can create containers and stuff like that, and you can test stuff right on it, right? And so you are already working through your web browser in the cloud to do this. And there is a little piece of Unix in there, and it's fun to play around with that, I guess, or whatever. And then, you essentially, you deploy this in some sort of way. Like you can use Kubernetes, you can use like app runners and all this other stuff, right? And so it is kind of fun. But essentially, what we're getting into is that the whole concept back in the days of having fun with Unix and fun on the internet was there was all this freedom. And now it's kind of like, oh, not only is your operating system in AWS now, everything you're doing is there. So you do it the AWS way. So people that were frustrated with having to do everything the Microsoft way, welcome to AWS or Google Cloud or Azure. It's like everything you're doing is going to be their way. And a lot of the reason of this is that corporations got fed up with the complexity of everything that's going on. And so everything is being homogenized now, right? And frankly, I'm not going to disagree. The best decisions are typically, although a lot of people are disagreeing with Kubernetes and saying you really don't need to use Kubernetes. Who knows, right? You can orchestrate your own stuff. But corporations aren't going to buy into that these days. They're like, no, everyone uses Kubernetes. Everyone uses CrowdStrike. Everyone does this. Everyone does that. That's just the way it is right now. But why apologize? It's like, well, is the internet making your life better? How about Ticketmaster? Due to, it's not so much the internet, but computers mixed with the internet, they can now use dynamic pricing very easily. Much like the airlines used to do this, but the airlines had to buy huge Sun Microsystem computers running so many processors to compute the cost of every single seat on every single flight, right? They were using Sun Microsystems for that. It was a huge investment. Ticketmaster, I'm sure there's an investment in their dynamic pricing. But it ultimately, what it comes down to, it is the biggest rip-off engine on the face of the planet. Because not only, hey, these tickets are popular. We're going to start charging you $300 now to go see this band you want to see, or $1,000 or $5,000. Not only that, oops, we gave away all of your credit card information, and there's nothing you can do about it, right? How about Facebook? Say something wrong about Putin. This is what I did. I said something wrong about Putin. Gee, how can anyone say anything wrong about the guy? And I was booted off for 2 days because they said, do you still agree with your statement? I'm like, hell yeah, I agree with my statement. Okay, you obviously didn't learn. What kind of totalitarian garbage is that? There's no support for any of these things. Everything is automated. And now they're like, thank God we have AI. So we're going to automate it even more. And so you, as the customer, are nothing. Most of the time, you're not paying. They're just mining your data, and they're making money from that. Or they're making money from advertising. I'd say it'd be better to pay. I would rather pay for a social network and have a say in how it's run than to be treated like absolute garbage. And that is how you are treated by these companies. So the world that we have ushered in, I haven't even mentioned how these companies spend so much time on psychology and making sure that you're using their apps as much as possible. It is completely dumbing down our entire society and making us less competitive. So there's all of these things. And so, I've made a few videos where, well, you know what? I'm not working right now. I'll drink as much as I want, and you can go to hell if you have an opinion about it. But, I've made a few videos where it's obvious that I'm a bit depressed about where things. Who wouldn't be depressed? Something that you believed in, something that was fun, something that required creativity, required intelligence. It looked like it was something that was going to raise society up, is now being used to destroy society. I cannot think of very many good things coming out of it anymore. It's as simple as that. And people may say I'm crazy by posting something like this. It's like, you got to get back making like lots of money. Why? Why do I have to get back into that? I am looking for a good company, but I want to work for a company that is doing good for society. and they want to use computers, and they may want to use AWS, and they may want to use Google Cloud or even Azure in order to achieve this. That's what I want, but that's what I've always wanted. I think all of the companies, say for one, that I've ever worked for, had a good idea about what they wanted to do, and it was a decent thing that they were doing, and they were not greedy in what they were trying to do. And so I'll always look for that, you know? That's what it really comes down to. Now, I haven't been looking lately because I have to deal with the fact that, well, you know, you step back after 20 years at one place and you have to say, well, what do I want to achieve? What's important to me? You know? And can I achieve it with any of these companies? Maybe they need other people. And so I will become a stock boy at Value Mart if my back stops hurting. I'm in so much pain. So that's the whole story. And, going way back to the days when I got involved with the internet and I got involved with Unix and all that other stuff, I had a lot of friends saying it was crap. And I disagreed with them. And I think we've hit an equilibrium now where I'm kind of like, you know what? Yeah, you know, if corporations are running all of this stuff, there's going to be a lot of crap. And it may not be good for society, you know. Ask yourself, now that we can spend money all the time, it used to be if you didn't go to the bank that day by 5 o'clock, you weren't spending money. We spend money all the time. We're constantly dumping money onto the internet, but still, people are getting laid off. And like in my country, unemployment's going up. And it's kind of like, well, where did we go wrong? Right? Where have things gone wrong? Now, Canada has a lot of other problems outside of the internet. So there is that. But that's generally my story. And I think it's good to be honest about things. We are at we have been now for 5 years at a huge changing point in what the internet is all about. What the internet is all about right now is huge data centers owned by huge companies calling all of the shots under the guise of security, whereas it's really about power. And people should be very concerned because the old days of saying, I'm going to set up some servers and I'm going to do something are dying out. They're completely dying out. So think about it. I'd love to hear from people who are working for a great company that are doing great things inside the cloud, outside the cloud. I'd love to hear about it. I do still enjoy all my Unix stuff, and obviously I post videos into one of the biggest social networks on the face of the planet, right? Great. But no one's watching. I can be honest with you about that. Have a good night.